It has a square inside. Okay.
Okay, this video is to show a prototype of the Silkrip Mark III ORR computer. First, just a tour of the pieces. There's this main box, and over here is a remote display for the driver. The remote display just has the ahead behind time on it, which is this display here on the main box. For those of you familiar with the Mark II or Mark I version of the Silkrip ORR computer, this one is much simpler in operation. Instead of having an arm clear switch here, there's no switch there. So the first thing we're going to do is turn the power on, and notice that the green LED comes on. And we're going to wait for 10 seconds. That 10-second delay is just to allow me to upload information into a computer if it's hooked into the computer. So now you see the ahead behind display is starting to count down, getting farther and farther behind. And the mileage display, which is down here, is at 0. And we're at the start line for the first leg of just a test leg. But most of the ORR events, in fact all but one in the United States, are two-way events. The one exception is the Silver State Classic Challenge, which is a one-way event. This yellow LED indicates that we're near, in this case, near the start line or near a waypoint. Every leg of every race has 5 waypoints. The first one is at the start, and the last one is at the finish of the leg. Notice that the green LED, the power light, is now blinking. That means that it's receiving the signal from the satellite, the GPS signal. Now, when you get close to the starting line and you have the yellow LED and you have the green blinking light, knowing that you have a GPS signal, you get ready to start, and within 30 seconds of your out time, you push this push button just once. And now notice that the red LED is blinking. And we have about 15 seconds to go.
I can't see either the green, yellow, or red LED.
Okay, can you zoom in?
Yeah.
Okay, we're just about ready to start. Notice that the ahead behind went to 0. And we're leaving the start line. The average speed for this little test loop is 35 miles an hour. Notice that the mileage is incrementing. The ahead behind is not getting quite as far behind. We're approaching the first waypoint after the start, which is this intersection up here. And notice that the yellow LED is on because when we get within 0.3 of a mile, and now the red LED has come on, meaning that it found the waypoint automatically and adjusted the mileage and adjusted the ahead behind time accordingly. So now we're above our 35 mile an hour speed limit, and we're headed towards the next waypoint, which is a couple of miles away. Notice that the ahead behind time is decrementing getting closer to 0. And the mileage continues to increment. The mileage is incrementing because it's using the GPS latitude and longitude location information to determine how far it's traveling. There's a GPS antenna that's connected to the box, and that's some of all those wires up there. This green cable is an Ethernet cable that connects the remote display to the main box. Again, this is just a prototype, so the main box and especially the remote display are just kind of hacked up right now. But the software should be working, and the hardware is working other than the final mechanical design, where they'll be in neat boxes. The power to the box comes from plus 12 volts, so I just plugged it into a 12 volt power outlet. I wanted to use a USB port to power it, but unfortunately that doesn't provide enough current or enough power to power especially these displays. So now we're at about 1.7 miles from the start, and we're down at -6 seconds, -5 something. And up at the next intersection, which is about half a mile away, will be the next waypoint. At that waypoint, just like every waypoint before the finish, the Silkrip ORR computer will adjust the mileage to the known mileage from the start to that waypoint. So here we are, the yellow LED is on, and now we get close to the waypoint and the red LED came on. It actually came on before the waypoint, but don't worry about that. It automatically calculates how far away from the waypoint it is when it makes that change, and it adds that incremental mileage to its mileage correction. I don't have a sun shield on these
Yes, I noticed.
displays, so it makes it a little hard to see unless we're in the shade. Normally you'd put a sun shield on, or you'd have the box mounted, the main box mounted down lower, so you'd be able to see it. Now we're going to turn left at this intersection, and there's only one more waypoint before the finish. And we want that waypoint fairly close to the finish line, within a couple miles or a mile. So that you can get a very accurate finish. So we're about 6 or 7 seconds behind. The next waypoint is a couple miles away at a little side street called Hummingbird Lane. And then shortly after that will come the finish. Now at the finish line, the box will automatically detect the finish line, and it will freeze the display, the ahead behind time and the mileage at the finish line or just past the finish line. So the way you work it is, when you get close to the finish line, you try to make the box read 0. I'm not going to do that on this leg to show you something important about how the box works, but so we'll be a little bit ahead of time, a few seconds. But what you do is you try to proceed through the finish line at exactly your target speed. Now you may wonder how the box knows about waypoints and target speeds and things like that. And the answer is that they're all programmed in simple text files on a micro SD card, which is a little memory card that plugs in the side of the box. So you have a different card for different races, and if you have a practice course laid out, then you'll have that practice course as one of them. Okay, so now we're coming up to the finish line. And here's the finish line right here. Notice that the ahead behind has frozen at 13.36 seconds. And the mileage is frozen at 4.612. So that was the first leg. But we were 13.36 seconds ahead. So what are we going to do about that? And the answer is, don't worry about it, because the box has written that finishing time, the ahead behind time, on the SD card. So now we're going to turn this off, turn it back on, and when we start the second leg, the ahead behind will automatically start out at a positive 13.36 seconds. So it takes into account the error that you had, plus or minus, at the end of the first leg. And you don't have to worry about that. So now we're going to come up to the start line for the second leg. And now we're at the start line, we're waiting for the GPS to get a signal because this green LED has to be blinking. And now it's blinking. You can stop the video, there's a problem. So now we have the yellow going, and it's the same procedure. We'll wait for our out time now, which in this case is 30 seconds after the minute. And now we have our out time, and it started 13.3 seconds ahead. So it's taken into account the error on the outbound leg. So it's pretty much the same procedure on the inbound leg, that is the second leg of the event. Again, 5 waypoints, including the start and finish. So we went through the start. We're just going to go back around that same loop, but the waypoints are a little bit different. to pull over here and let this car pass. So the speed limit here is 40 miles an hour, and we're getting farther ahead. You can see we're 18 seconds ahead now. Now you can see the yellow LED came on, which means that we're within 3/10 of a mile of the next waypoint, which is this intersection up here at the stop sign. And now it found that waypoint. The red LED is on for a few seconds. Now the red LED went off, and we're headed for the next waypoint. The next waypoint will be at the next, just past the next stop sign at the intersection where we're going to turn right. And it'll go through the same sequence again. When it's within 3/10 of a mile, the yellow LED comes on. And then when it sees that it's close enough to the waypoint, it will automatically hit the waypoint. The red LED will come on. It will adjust the mileage. There's the red LED in the intersection. Now it turns out that at these lower practice speeds, especially as low as 35 miles an hour, it's extremely difficult to get close to your target time. It actually gets easier the faster you go. That may seem counterintuitive, but there's good mathematical reasons for it. We're just being considerate of this bicyclist up here. And now you can see we're pretty much on time. And we're going to get a little ahead of time. The next waypoint is at the next stop sign, which is a couple miles away. And there we'll turn right and head towards the finish, which was the same place as we started the first leg. But that speed limit is 25 miles an hour in that residential area, so we'll want to be a little bit ahead when we get to that second to last waypoint at the intersection. gives me a chance to thank our videographer, Val Sagetti, for being patient enough to go along on this test ride. So we're about 8 seconds ahead. And there's the last waypoint. And the yellow LED comes on, signifying that the next waypoint is near. And we're getting close to the finish line here. And again, the ahead behind time has frozen at minus 0.58 seconds, and the leg was 4.612 miles long. And that's all you have to do. Now, during the event on both legs, the box has been keeping a log of what happened at each waypoint, at the start and each waypoint along the way and at the finish. And that log is written on the SD card. So one of the things we can do now that the event, in this case the practice run, is over, is take the SD card out, take it to our laptop computer at home or in a motel, and take a look at the log. We can print it out. We can see what the latitude and longitude was for each waypoint, how far ahead or behind we were at each waypoint, and what the mileage was at each waypoint. Now the unit also has another mode. Suppose you don't have an SD card in the box. Then it's in what's called free run mode. It defaults the target speed to 70 miles an hour. And you can just go ahead and run, push the push button once, and then you're running a course and seeing the mileage and seeing the ahead behind time. Then it has another version of free run mode. Suppose you put the SD card in, but the SD card doesn't have the waypoint information for the event in it. In that case, it's in free run mode, but it allows you to push the push button and log the latitude and longitude and ahead behind time and mileage every time you push that push button. So if you're setting up a practice course or you're wanting to revise the race parameters, you can use that logging feature in free run mode 2 to then take the SD card and examine the log and use those results for your own waypoints. If you want to change your target speed, that's a simple text file called ts.txt, and you do that in your laptop. And instead of 35, we'd put in the number 155 for 155 mile an hour target speed. Not in this electric vehicle, but in maybe a Corvette. So you can change the target speed. You can use the standard race parameters. You can create your own race parameters. And you can see how you did. So that's the end of this little portion of the video.
I did start.
Okay, so the little micro SD card is right in here, and you can pull it out. There it is. And we're going to take that and put it into a laptop computer and read the log of what happened during this test run.
Stop
Okay?
the video.